Welcome to my review of the Doxa Sub 200 Sharkhunter. On the bracelet, these retail for just a little bit under $1,000, and on the rubber strap, you can find them for just around 900 bucks. The Doxa Sub 200 represents a tremendous amount of value for a couple different reasons. For starters, you're getting a diver with a lot of credibility, name, and heritage recognition, and have been making diving watches for an extremely long time. But I think a few questions that can be asked before we claim that this is an amazing value proposition is how does it stack up against some other brands, particularly micro brands in this segment that have been continuing to put out great divers and pricing them accordingly. And the last thing I would love to talk about in this video is like, who is this watch for and who should buy it? Before we get to tackle some of those questions, let's first talk a little bit about the watch and some of my experience that I had since owning the Doxa Sub 200. The first thing is the case, and this is what really attracted me to the watch in the beginning. The Doxa Sub 200 had all the correct dimensions. It's a 42mm case, however, with very short lugs coming in at 46mm, allow this watch to be worn on a wrist as small of approximately 6¼ inches. You can really even go down to 6 inches. Around the bezel, when I measured the watch, although Doxa says it's a 42mm diameter, they're taking more of that diameter on the external of the case. When you wear the watch, the bezel is only 40mm in diameter. However, the watch does have substantial presence, and I would say wears truer to a 40mm as far as how it looks on your wrist, but it does have the wrist presence of a 42mm watch. The case is 14mm thick according to Doxa. Once again, when I measured it myself, including the domed sapphire crystal, the case came in closer to 13.5mm. So Doxa is definitely under promising and over delivering in this space, so do not let those dimensions scare you. And I will tell you, 1mm of that thickness is due to the sapphire crystal. If you're just measuring the bottom of the case to the top of the actual bezel, you're looking at 12.5mm. So Doxa went with an enclosed case back that's engraved with the Sharkhunter engraving that looks pretty cool. It looks like a fish with a wave background. And you will notice that this watch, equivalent to its name, have about 200 meters of water resistance. Definitely a dive watch that you can take out in the ocean, and given the price point, not one that I would be afraid to actually go diving with. The lug length on the watch is 19mm, which is a very odd size to find. I will tell you, strap options will be a little bit tougher if you want to find a strap that is 19mm. However, I found myself primarily wearing the watch on 20mm straps without any problem. I really do love the look of the dial through this super domed sapphire crystal, and Fotina is not everyone's thing. However, I do love that on this Doxa dial, you have matching Fotina on the hands and the indices, in addition to Fotina on the bezel. This does create a very warm look and give it more of that vintage aesthetic. Once again, Fotina is not for everyone, but I do think on this particular Doxa, it does look really nice. In between the Fotina baton 5-minute markers, you have just white painted on minute markers that gives a little bit more contrast to the dial. As far as text on the dial, Doxa chose to keep the dial really clean. We have Doxa right below 12 o'clock, and above 6 o'clock, you just have the word Sub 200 with Swiss made surrounding the 6 o'clock hour marker. If I have one complaint, is the hands themselves. There's nothing inherently wrong with the hands. I do think they're very basic. I think given the look of this watch, it would have been great to see some sword style hands with some luminescent. Instead, I think Doxa kept it safe and went with baton style minute hands with a really cool square lollipop second hand that does give the watch a little bit more character. For my personal taste, I always prefer a circular lollipop over the square one. However, this does give the watch a nice, different aesthetic than what we usually see from very many Submariner homages. This is definitely not a homage to the Sub. I would say more akin to the case shape of a Speedmaster or the previous iteration of the Ocean. I do think that the hands and the way that the lume is painted on the minute markers make the watch look a little bit cheaper. I would have preferred to have baton style minute markers that were lume filled versus just a strip of lume paint. But once again, this watch is coming in under 900 bucks on the rubber strap. I think that is a very reasonable trade-off considering the price point. The bezel is extremely crisp, and I'm gonna try to capture that audio a little bit here. So you get a 120 click unidirectional bezel that does stay in place and have really great friction. From a movement perspective, we are looking at the ETA 2824-2. This is a tried and true workhorse movement that has been around for a really long time, and I thought was a really good choice for Doxa to use to keep this watch under $1,000 for a Swiss-made, reliable movement. I think this is what really brings this watch up to really great value proposition status. One of the things that I am a little disappointed in Doxa with this watch is that the watch only have a 38-hour power reserve, which leads me to believe that this movement is just a off-the-shelf movement without any modifications. 38-hour power reserve by today's standards is very lacking. We're seeing more and more brands push at least to 48 hours to give you a full 2 days, if we're not seeing 70 kind of being the new industry standard for 3-hand only watches. If this was a chronograph watch, 38-hour power reserve would be very disappointing. Given that this is a basic 3-hander with a date, I would have loved to see Doxa push this up to at least 48-hour power reserve, matching some of the other divers on the market. From a wearability perspective, this watch, like I said earlier, wears really amazing on the wrist due to its lug-to-lug size and wrist presence. I actually enjoy every time I put this watch on. I am actually on the search for an Omega 2500D Planet Ocean that was quite a bit thinner than my Planet Ocean from before. It was almost 16 millimeters thick. So if I was to add that to the collection, this one would more than likely be on the way out. However, it has fulfilled a very great purpose for the 9 months I've had it in my collection, and I'll probably hold on to it for a little bit more time. So this is a great watch for someone looking for a vintage diver that don't want to spend a ton of money on a brand like Omega, but you still want something with some brand credibility. Look no further than a Doxa 200. There are some other really good options on the market where I think you're gonna get a great Swiss movement and really great finishing. I would point you in the direction of the Manta Ocean King. A lot of those are sold out new, but you can find them used on the market for $1,200, which is a little bit more than a Doxa. MSRP is gonna be double the Doxa. So once again, this makes this a really great value proposition. Another option that you can look at is Helios. These are gonna come in a little bit less than the Doxa for a Swiss-made movement. They use a Salida 200 based movement, and you're going to be coming around like $750. So the Helios is a very great option. I have not had an opportunity to be hands-on with that watch in particular, but I've heard nothing but great things, and they do look great on the wrists from pictures that I've seen. So if you're looking for other options and really want to stay under that $1,000 price point for some of these great watches, the Doxa does deserve a really good look. Hopefully my experience with the watch will help anyone with future purchasing decisions. With that said, as always, thank you for watching the channel. Please check out my Instagram page. This is where I post what I'm wearing and also do a lot of my watch photography. And I'm also trying to grow my base there. So once again, thank you again. We will chat soon.